Hi, this is Scott with 4D Tech. Today we are in a 2015 Ford Focus that came equipped with a 4-inch screen. We will be installing the 4-inch to 8-inch conversion with Sync 2 My Ford Touch from 4D Tech in this vehicle. Everything that you see installed in this video comes in the complete plug-and-play custom program kit from 4D Tech. To install the kit, we'll need a few basic tools. Some plastic dash tools, a T25 Torx driver, and a flat blade and a small hook tool would be helpful too. There are tools available on our website for your convenience. Let's get started. First, we need to remove this lower piece of trim that goes around the shifter bezel. We'll grab one of our dash removal tools and start prying just away from the black trim, in between the black trim and the outer trim. Once we do that, we can pull forward here. This little side panel here, you can just pop that off enough to get this panel out from underneath it. Next, we need to remove this small panel that's got the passenger side airbag light in it. We'll get our dash removal tool underneath there and pry down. Once we get it to this point, these clips hold on pretty tight, but you'll just get your fingers behind there and pull harder and it'll pop out. And then to unplug this connector here, you push the little tab on the top middle and unplug it, and we'll set this out of the way. Next, we'll need our T25 Torx driver, and we'll need to take out 5 screws. There's one down here at the base of the shifter, 2 here, and then 2 underneath the center here for the upper bezel. With those screws out, we need to unsnap this panel and get it out of the way. The best thing will be to put the vehicle, turn the ignition on, and pull the shifter back. Make sure our parking brake is set. And pry up on this panel to release it and get it loose. Once you have it loose, you can push up on this trim right here. And you'll feed the middle trim down through the outer bezel to pull the outer bezel out. Once we turn this bezel, we need to disconnect everything underneath here. There's a power outlet down here. We'll squeeze the tab and unplug that. And then there's 3 connectors here. This one has the clip on the top. We'll squeeze that. These have the clips on the bottom side. We'll squeeze that with our thumb and unplug it as well. That just leaves this last cable right here. This is where the flat blade comes in handy. You pry the top and the bottom. There's tabs above and below it. And then it'll slide out. And we'll set this out of the way momentarily. Now this USB cable that we just unplugged from there, we're going to be running a different one during the install. So we'll just tuck that down out of the way so we don't confuse it. We can put it back in the park position. And shut the key off. Next, we'll need to pull out on this panel here. You'll basically, you can grip underneath the plastic and pull up to release it. and then pull out. Once you've done that, swing it around. There's a single connector here that unplugs, a little tab on the side where my thumb was, and then we'll pull that passenger side airbag connector out of that square. Next, we'll need to remove the screen and radio assembly out of here. We'll be reusing this module here, the CD slot, but we do need to get it out of the way for now. So there's 2 screws here and 4 screws on the screen carriage there. With those 2 screws out, it may be easier to pull this out before taking the rest of them. You just give it a tug, swing it out of the way. There's a white clip right there for the antenna connector, and clips on the top of these 2 connectors to unplug them, and we'll set this out of the way. With those screws out, we'll just pull forward on this carriage, swing it around. This is a flip lock connector, so there's a little retainer tab right there that I'm pushing my fingernail, and then we'll pull the lever to remove the lever lock connector. You pull it all the way flat and it'll unplug, and then we'll set this out of the way. Next, we'll begin to route the main conversion harnessing for the 4D Tech kit. With the main conversion harnessing here, there's going to be one large bundle with all the T harnesses and that for the conversion harness, and then there's going to be this small single straight through harness as well. So the small single straight through harness is going to plug into the connector that was plugged into the control panel that was right below the screen. We'll unbundle our main harness. Okay. So this connector right here that's got the yellow connectors near it is going to plug into the lever lock connector that was in the 4-inch screen earlier. So you'll slide that in, make sure the lever is flat, slide it in till the lever starts to move, and then pull the lever till it locks to lock that in place. This connector is going to stay up top here to plug into the new screen. And we will route this long wire with the gray connector is going to end up going all the way back to the hub. As you're doing this, you'll just kind of want to untangle things so that the routing's neater. You'll take this large connector here and the gray connector, and we're just going to pass it down right behind this black plastic down into this next opening here. Now there's this black box behind here, and in the lower left hand corner is going to be a lever lock connector. It's going to look exactly like this one, but it'll have a gray lever on it. And you'll push the tab, and I'll demo on this connector. To run these lever lock connectors, you always push the tab behind the lever to release it, and flat takes the connector out, up top locks it in. So down here, we'll push that little tab in front of the gray lever. And this connector is facing down, so it's a little bit more difficult to do. We push the tab, flick the lever, and unplug the connector and pull it up. There isn't going to be much slack on it, so we'll just hold on to it with the lever flat. We'll take this large connector here, plug it in, and push the lever back to the lock position. So as you're pushing it in, the lever will start to move, and then you push it all the way to lock position to lock it in. So we'll take this small T-harness here that has these small flat connectors, and we're going to push it up and over here. And we will be going behind the glove box to finish routing this. We just want to get it in that position so we're ready. And then this T-harness here that's got the pink wire, a little bit larger connector, we'll grab these connectors that were plugged into the metal box with the CD slot called the ACM. And the smaller of the two connectors will plug into one side of here. And when we reassemble, this will plug into the ACM. Next, we'll route our two USB cables down out of the opening that we need. So there's going to be one USB cable that's got the same connectors at both ends. So this we're going to put with the long wire with the gray connector, push it up through, and bring it out in the opening where the screen is going to be. Now this one with the gray connector on it is going to replace the one that was clipped into the dash panel down in this lower corner. So we're going to leave it down in this opening and just put it together with these. So we have 3 cables total that need to get routed to the back of the harness. So what we are going to do for now is down in this lower right hand corner, we're going to just follow this big side panel down, and if you pull out on it a little bit, you can see the floor right through this opening. And we're just going to push these cables down and pull them out the bottom. You'll want to pull the slack out to the floor while still leaving enough cable up here to connect to the panel and such. And then we'll return to routing those cables later. Next, we'll need to get behind the glove box to tie in the one T-harness that we sent over from the radio opening. On our demo vehicle here, somebody had previously broke the glove box and the hinges are broken, so it drops right out. Assuming you don't have a broken hinges like we do here, you'll have to actually remove the entire glove box assembly, which is not that hard. So all you'll have to do is pop this end panel off over here, the whole end cap, with one of your panel tools, and there will be T25 Torx here and here, one on the end and 2 way back in these corners tucked up in. So you take those 5 out and the whole glove box unit comes out to gain access to what we need to tie in that T-harness. Now we're up in the top of the glove box opening. We're accessing through the glove box opening up high below the top of the dash here. We have the harness that we brought over earlier during the install, the T-harness. So for the Sync 2 conversion, what we need to do is there's a metal plate right here, and it's got a barcode sticker on it, and there's a module on the top of it. There's a connector at the back side of that module. It's going to have a clip all the way to the left-hand side on the edge of the connector, and we're going to push that clip and unplug the connector. You can see the clip is right here, and we hit our fingernail inside this little box to unclip it. And we're going to plug that in to this connector here of the T-harness. And then we'll take the other end of the T-harness and plug it into the connector there, back in the module. And then when you're done, you'll just replace the glove box. Next, we'll be installing the Sync 2 My Ford Touch screen and module and carriage assembly. The carriage might come shipped separately from the screen with the brackets in the package. If they are, then the screws will be included to put them together before you install it in the vehicle. So to install this, we need to grab this main 54-pin connector from the conversion harness. Want to make sure the lever lock is open and horizontal. If it's up, then it's in the closed position. You want to push the little latch right here and open it till it's horizontal. We'll plug that into the back of the screen and push on it till the lever starts to move, and then we'll push the lever to lock it in all the way. You'll see it sits flat and snug in there. We'll take the USB cable here. This is the one that we ran down to run to the back earlier. And we'll take that USB cable and plug it into the black port on the back of the module. If there's multiple ports on the back of the module, it will be the black port. If there's a light gray one, it is unused. So with those two things connected, there is no antenna that needs to be added for the Sync 2 system. It uses the same GPSM module in the vehicle that the Sync 1 used for 911 assist. So next we'll get this installed in the dash. And we line it up so that these little circles on the side here go into these rails. And then push it in, and it'll clip in the bottom, and these 4 screw holes will line up. And then you'll want to put those 4 screws in. With those 4 screws in, next thing we need to do is reinstall the audio control module, the box with the CD slot. So your alignment of your harnesses coming out here are going to be crucial when you're installing this, because you want to make sure things are coming out in the right spot. So you want to make sure if things are tangled up a little, get them untangled. These are going to be the connectors to go into the ACM. This is the connector that you need to go to that passenger side airbag light. You want to make sure that's coming out from between here, along with this square connector here from the conversion harness. That's going to come out this underneath the ACM in between these 2 nubs as well. So this has to end up coming out up top here in this horseshoe area. So what we're going to do is plug this back in. Make sure this T-harness is in line from the conversion harness. And plug the antenna back in, which is this with the white tab up. Make sure everything clicks into place. And we'll take this short jumper that was part of the conversion kit and run it up the back. And then we'll push this in until it locks into these tabs right here. You want to make sure that this connector is up here like it's supposed to be, and these 2 are down here as discussed. Next, we'll put those 2 screws back in. Next, we are at the bench, and we have the old bezel out of the vehicle, and we have the new 8-inch bezel that's going in the vehicle. We need to move over these vent pieces from the old bezel to the new bezel, and it can be a bit of a tedious task, and that's why we're doing it at the bench, but we're going to show you how here. When you're looking at the vents, there's these tabs right here that need to get pried out. But there's a few of them down each side. And you just have to keep working at the tabs on both sides till you get everything loose. And you'll just have to keep moving back and forth. You might need multiple tools at once or whatever. I use the small flat blade. You know, this one back here grabs again once another one releases. So that's what I mean by it's a bit of a tedious task. You just kind of got to go back and forth with it. So these are the tabs I'm talking about on each side. And then the whole thing slides out, and then we come over to here and get it all aligned in the new bezel and snap it in. And you'll just want to push it in till all those tabs are seated. Make sure that this wheel is aligned where it's supposed to be. And then you'll want to do the same thing with the other side and move that over as well. Now that we got the vent pieces transferred over, we'll get things reassembled using the new bezel. So with the new bezel, this square connector down here is going to plug in right here. Now we'll want to make sure that this connector for the passenger side airbag light passes through this rectangle as we reassemble. So this needs to connect to the back of the new hazard switch up here, but it's going to be a short wire. So what it does is it just plugs in the back of that hazard switch. The clip will be facing towards the driver's side of the panel if it's oriented correctly. And you'll push that in till it clips in. So we'll turn this. Once again, as I said, let's make sure that as we reassemble this, we pull this wire for the passenger side airbag light through that rectangle at the bottom of this panel. You'll push the top of the panel all the way up in first, and then tilt the bottom in. And it'll clip in at the bottom corners here once everything's aligned, and then you can snap it in the top corners as well. Next, we need to reinstall the lower bezel trim. To do this, we'll have to pull the shifter back. This large connector gets plugged in here. The black connector up in the corner, clips facing down, and then the blue connector is the lower one up here. Now the USB, make sure that the USB cable that we ran down and back earlier is the one that you're reinserting into the panel here. And you're just going to plug that in till it locks in. If you reuse the old one, then that USB connection will not work. So we'll flip this down, plug back in the power outlet now that everything's plugged back in. Once again, this connector right here is crucial. It's so easy to end up with it stuck behind this panel because you're concentrating on this and not paying attention to where that connector is. So you want to make sure that this connector is out in this opening. Pull the surround for the shifter up through. And push everything into place and lock the shifter bezel back in. Now we'll reinstall the 5 screws we took out earlier, the 4 across here and the 1 in the bottom. Okay, now we'll reinstall this small piece of trim that's got the passenger side airbag light in it. Make sure you reconnect that connector. Tuck it into the hole and snap that back in. And then to reinstall this lower trim, this hooks in, these 2 bottom hooks go forward, so you can't just snap it down. You got to start sliding it in from back to front. And then you can align all these clips at once because they all push forward. And then snap this back on the side. We now need to replace this USB plate with the Sync 2 hub that comes with the kit for the system to work properly. We will be routing the 3 wires that we dropped down on the passenger side earlier. We'll be routing those through this hole. You'll want to run them along the edge of the carpet and the console. When we're done pulling them up through, you'll just tuck them underneath the console to hold them. So to get this plate out of here, this can be a bit of a tedious task, but just take your time on it. You don't want to be prying around the edge here or so unless you got to really you want to protect if you're going to put a screwdriver underneath there to not mar this up. The best thing to do is if you got a hook tool or something similar, what I like to do is I'll hook through the opening where the USB hole is, push it in there a little to hold, and then pull up on the whole thing to pop it out. Once we do that, we just need to disconnect it. Where these wires are, there's a little clip right there, and that connector comes off. To get the USB jack out, basically it has to be pried above and below it at the same time. I'm going to use the tension of the cable to help us with this and just pry above and below while I'm pulling out on the plate to get it disconnected. These will no longer be needed, so we'll tuck those back in the hole before we're done. Now we've routed the 3 cables back to this area right here on the passenger side of the console. There will be a single bolt here, and what you'll be doing is running the cables up just in front of that hole. You'll be able to push in on the carpet, and I can look down through the hole where the hub is going to go and see where my finger is. It still won't be simple to pull them up, but the best thing to do is I have a piece of coat hanger wire with a hook in it, and I'm going to pass it down to that opening, and I see it come right out on the bottom. And I'll hook the cable right behind the connector. Now you want to help the connector pass by the body of the console. You don't want to tug hard with the hook. You just want the hook to be a guide. It's tedious to do, but you will be able to hook them and pull them up through, and you'll want to do this with the other 2 cables as well. By the time you get the 3rd cable up here, you'll be a master at this. Next, we need to take the Sync 2 hub that came in the kit and install it in the opening. So we'll flip that over, and we need to plug the cables in. So the gray power connector goes into this flat. Diagonal from is the black connector. Don't worry, these 2 USB connectors are keyed, so you can't mix them up. And then the gray one below the power cable. We're going to tuck these other cables in because they're not used. Put this wiring back in the console. Then push the hub into place. If you are installing the navigation version of the Sync 2 kit, you're going to take the map card that was included in the kit and insert that into the SD card slot. It'll only go in one way. So if it doesn't go in, just flip it over, push it in until it clicks. Then make sure you tuck your wires underneath the console going down the passenger side. Next, we need to run the can opener flash programmer that comes with the 4-inch to 8-inch conversion. The kit itself with the module comes pre-programmed from 4D Tech for your vehicle. What this programmer does is make just a couple changes to the vehicle to then accept the 4D Tech kit. So to run this programmer, we need to turn the ignition on, gain access to the diagnostic port underneath the dash by opening this door. And then we want to make sure that this pigtail is installed on the programmer. Plug it into the diagnostic port, and we'll monitor the lights on the programmer. It'll blink blue for a while, showing you that it is programming the vehicle. Once the programmer turns green, the programming is complete. You'll disconnect the programmer and set it aside, as it'll no longer be needed in the vehicle. And now that we've completed the install of the My Ford Touch Sync 2 system, we're going to fire up the system for the first time. System will load up, and we're at the home page here. You'll see we now have the My Ford Touch system. We did install the navigation version of this, so it does have the navigation maps as well. I'd also want to show you that when you do this upgrade, this system does retain all your current features. For example, your backup camera will now come through the screen along with your active guidelines. If your vehicle has those, the zoom will work as well. The steering wheel controls function. So all your current controls for your 4-inch screen system continue to function. Now you see how to install the 4-inch to 8-inch conversion with Sync 2 My Ford Touch in the 2015 Focus. I am Scott with 4D Tech. Thank you for checking out our video.